So the learning objective today is I can use adverbs and conjunctions to start sentences. Hi Year 3, so as you'll have seen from the learning objective, today's lesson is all about using adverbs and conjunctions at the start of our sentences. And this is really to help us with some writing that we're going to be doing on Theseus and the Minotaur later this week. Today we're going to be practicing using conjunctions and adverbs in some sentences about Theseus and the Minotaur. So if for any reason you didn't do yesterday's lesson, then you'll need to go back and re-watch Monday's lesson, because in that lesson I read the story of Theseus and the Minotaur to you. Okay, so today we're going to start thinking first of all about what an adverb and a conjunction are. And to help you with this as well, on the sheet for today I've put a link to some BBC videos on adverbs and conjunctions, so it would be helpful if you'd watch those as well. So we're going to start thinking, what is an adverb? So let's break that word up. You'll see that I've written it in two different colours there, adverbs. So verbs, well, we need to know what a verb is if we're going to understand what an adverb is. Verbs, as hopefully you remember, are doing words. So walking, hopping, skipping, words that describe what you're doing are verbs. Adverbs, well, I'm sure you'll know that an adjective is a describing word. So an adverb is a word that describes a verb. So it describes how you're doing something. So if we look at this sentence here, the boy waited patiently, I'd just like you to think for a moment, what is the verb, the doing word, in that sentence? Hopefully you'll have thought that the verb there is waited, that's what he's doing. And then I'd like you to think, what is the adverb? What are we describing? How are we describing what he's doing? So the adverb is patiently, because that describes how he is waiting. Now I've had a little think of some other adverbs. I've got slowly, quickly, cautiously, nervously, eagerly. And you might have noticed there that often, not always, but often it's the case that adverbs end with ly. What I'd like you to just do now is pause the video for a minute and just make a note of as many adverbs as you can think of. Maybe give yourself 2 minutes. How many adverbs can you think of? Now we're going to think about conjunctions, because today we're going to be using adverbs and conjunctions to start our sentences. So, conjunctions. How I always remember what a conjunction is that the word junction is in conjunction. And if you think of a road junction is where two roads join together. And a conjunction is where is a word that joins two parts of a sentence together. So like a road junction joins two parts of a road together. The word a conjunction joins two parts of a sentence, and the fancy word for parts of a sentence is a clause together. So it joins two clauses together. Okay, so let's have a look at a sentence then and work out what the conjunction is. So here we've got, the boy sat down and took out his sandwich. So think for a moment what the conjunction is. The conjunction is and, because it joins the two parts of the sentence together. So you've got one part of the sentence, another part of a sentence. Each of these are actually called clauses, that's the fancy word for them. And the conjunction joins those two together. So I've had a little think of some other conjunctions that I could think of. So we've got some other conjunctions: because, so that, or, if, when, but, although. And just like we did with adverbs, what I'd like you to do now is pause the video for maybe about 2 minutes again and just write out as many conjunctions as you can think of. Hopefully now you're feeling confident with what an adverb and a conjunction is. But you probably noticed that the other part of the learning objective for today was that we're going to be starting our sentences with these adverbs and conjunctions. And I just thought we'd think for a moment, why? Why are we going to do that? Well, the reason is that if you start your sentences with adverbs and conjunctions, it's a good way of making your writing sound more interesting and less boring. If you start your sentences in the same way, saying then, or he did this, he did this, he did this, it can just sound a little bit boring. And a really good way of making it more interesting is to use some adverbs and conjunctions at the beginning of our sentences. And actually the author, Marcia Williams, whose book we're looking at today and this week about Greek myths, did exactly that in Theseus and the Minotaur. Let's have a look. Here's part of the story. When Theseus finally landed, he found King Minos waiting with his daughter Ariadne. You'll notice there that Marcia Williams has started with the conjunction when. And in this sentence here, we've got bravely, he offered to join the next victims and tried to kill the Minotaur. So here, she started the sentence with the adverb bravely. So in today's lesson, as you might have seen from the sheet, what you're going to do is you're going to start writing some sentences about Theseus and the Minotaur, starting each sentence with an adverb. And to make it easier, in that first box, I've given you the adverb and sometimes a couple of other words as well to kind of lead on your sentence. So the first sentence we're just going to do all together. The first sentence starts, bravely Theseus, so we've got the adverb bravely, and so I might think, okay, what does Theseus do that's brave? Bravely Theseus offers to go and kill the terrifying Minotaur. Okay, you don't have to do your sentence in the same way. You can do it however you like, but there's just an example. And then what I'd like you to do is have a go completing the other sentences in that first box on the sheet. So hopefully now you've written your sentences that start with the adverbs, and now we're going to move on to sentences starting with conjunctions. So the first one we're going to do all together. The first one starts with the conjunction when. When Theseus set sail, he felt... Now, it's up to you how you continue this sentence, but I was thinking about it and I thought, well, maybe he feels more than one emotion. Maybe he's feeling anxious or worried about the dangers that lay ahead. So we might say he felt anxious about the dangers that lay ahead. But also maybe, he was, we could say, so he felt anxious about the dangers that lay ahead, but he was determined that he could succeed. Determined that he would succeed. So you might think for this sentence, he would succeed, about two emotions that you could use to describe how Theseus is feeling when he sets sail. And then once you've done that sentence, I'd like you to have a go at the other sentences with conjunctions. Once you've finished that, the next box has some other adverbs and conjunctions for you to use to write some other sentences about Theseus and the Minotaur. So I'm now going to talk about the extra challenge part of the sheet. Some of you might have noticed that in the sentences that I'd started for you, there are commas, and that the commas for the sentences that start with adverbs come in a different place to the sentences that start with conjunctions. Now, this is a little bit trickier, so it's meant to be a bit of an extra challenge, so don't worry if you find this a bit harder. So we're going to start thinking about where the comma would go if you started your sentence with an adverb. So let's have a look at this sentence here. Confidently, that's our adverb, Theseus marched into the labyrinth. So we've got the word confidently as our adverb describing how he's marching into the labyrinth. And you might notice there that the comma, which gives a little pause, is immediately after the adverb. So we've got confidently, comma, remember a comma goes on the line, from the line down, Theseus marched into the labyrinth. So what I'd like you to now do is go back and look at your sentences that start with adverbs, and maybe just after, immediately after each adverb, you can make sure that you've got a little comma. Now, where the comma goes when a sentence starts with a conjunction is slightly more complicated, so really don't worry if this is a bit challenging. So if I'd started with the conjunction because here, we've got the sentence, because Ariadne loved Theseus, she gave him the thread and the sword. You you might notice that I've got a comma here. Because Ariadne loved Theseus, comma, she gave him the thread and the sword. Now remember, your conjunction is a joining word that joins two parts of the sentence or clauses together. So this is one part of the sentence here, Ariadne loved Theseus, or one clause. And this is another part of the sentence or clause, she gave him the thread and the sword. And because we've done a slightly different thing here, and we've put the conjunction at the beginning of the sentence rather than in the middle of the two clauses, what we do to show where the middle of the two clauses is we put that comma. Now, if you're finding it a bit tricky, a good way of kind of working out where that comma will go is if you read it aloud to yourself, you will naturally pause between those two parts of the sentence, those two clauses. So that might be a good way if you're finding it a little bit trickier to know where that comma should go in the sentences that start with conjunctions. So it is a bit of an extra challenge, but if you can do, it would be great if you could go back to your sentences that start with conjunctions and see if you can add in the comma or the commas that go between the two clauses.